Hello and welcome to another edition of our Power BI Monthly Digests. And here we are in the month of October. Exciting.
Ooh.
Costumes, designs, right? As you see, we're wearing our costumes.
Yep, that's right.
Handsome, gorgeous men.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
So we've got a fun one, right? So, of course, if it's your first time, my name is Manuel Quintana.
And I'm Devin Knights. And you're right, we have a lot of kind of interesting new things that some are in preview that are going to be brand new for some folks. And others are kind of additions to things that maybe you've been familiar with in the past and some new enhancements to them.
One's a really simple thing we're going to mention, but it's kind of exciting only because we haven't talked about it in our digest, but there's a new default visual in Power BI, which has so much more of a deeper conversation that could happen. We get excited about it. More on that in a little bit. I guess that's a candy that we'll give out.
I like that.
Kind of thing, yeah.
I like that little trick or treat.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think the first thing we're going to start with is focus around DirectQuery. So many of you are familiar with DirectQuery. If you're not, very briefly, DirectQuery is an option that you have that allows you to connect directly to the underlying data source rather than importing your data into Power BI. And there's been a new enhancement that's come with your way your visuals interact with DirectQuery sources in the Power BI desktop and being pushed into the Power BI service.
And that's really important. There is a separation of behavior here. From when we experience this as report creators, and then also how users will experience this in the service side. And it also differentiates between Pro and Premium.
Yes, there's some differentiations there as well. But let's go ahead and take a look at the feature and take a peek and see what it's all about.
Absolutely.
All right, so in this example, you can see we have a pretty simple report, not a lot to it, and that's okay. We're just really focused on this new feature that has to do with refreshing from a DirectQuery data source.
And as you're saying, this one... this is a preview one as well. So
correct.
If you're kind of watching this and you just download it, you don't see it, just remember options, settings, options. Go to the preview features and just check boxes. It's going to be an option there. Automatic page refresh. It does require a restart of the desktop tool, but then you're in business. So that's one, and there is a second one we'll be talking about later. That's also a preview.
Absolutely. All right, so now if I want to actually enable this page, and it is something you do on a page-by-page basis, so report page is what I'm referring to here, I'll then select in the background of my report and go to the format settings of this page, and on the bottom you'll see that there is an option. I just turned it on. It's actually turned off by default. I turned it on a little bit prematurely here. And then underneath the page refresh settings, you can change this from what would normally be the default, which is 30 minutes. So let me turn it back on. You can see the default is every 30 minutes. It will refresh the visuals on this page. I'm going to change it to every 5 seconds like you saw just a moment ago. And we're going to go make a change in my data source. So I happen to have my data source here. It's a SQL database. And I'm going to go find a value that I want to adjust and actually see it appear in my data source. So I have one right here for sales amount. That's the column that we're looking at. And I'm going to update this to some ridiculous amount so it's really obvious whenever we have a change. And when I do that, let's make sure I committed that change. It looks like I did. Boom! There it is. So every 5 seconds now, that data source is refreshed, pushed into this visual, and we're able to see the results of it here.
Now, that's I do like one thing you mentioned as well is it's kind of neat that the scoping is set at the page level, which means you can have multiple pages. This one's going to be at certain intervals as compared to others.
Right.
That's really nice. The idea here is, of course, DirectQuery on the service, you don't need to set a refresh. It's like a live view. But if you have someone who leaves that report on their screen all day, normally they'd have to reselect it, go back into it, or hit the refresh option. Here, they never have to worry. Leave it up, put it on like maybe we have a staging area at work, and at that work we put up all our reports every day. We want to see how our sales team's doing. Just put them up on the screen. Leave it be static, and this is going to keep you live and up to date. Absolutely.
And so this setting not only is in the desktop, but this will overwrite any of the settings that are in the service.
Yes.
So if we change it to 5 seconds here, it's going to overwrite the settings in the service. There are some licensing things that go along with that.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, this is a page-by-page feature. So if I go to the create another page, you'll see I can set it differently on this new page as opposed to the last one.
I like that that minute differentiation. You can just choose different pages, different priorities.
Absolutely. Now, if I flip back over to my data source, let's just flip this back to what it was. Click away, and we should see after a few moments that data source get back updated.
There you go.
So that's the first feature. Pretty cool one. Let me go ahead and close out of this and get ready for our next example. But Manuel, let's talk about our next feature.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, that was one that kind of tapped into visuals, right? It's more of just a page refresh. So it's more of a setting, but it affects our visualizations.
Right.
More specifically, if you're paying close attention, if you were watching, in that last demonstration, you might have seen some additional visuals in our visual pane area.
Everybody loves new visuals.
Oh, yeah. And we actually have two. One we're going to focus on right now is a new Q&A visual.
Yep.
So this is not a new feature by any means. If you haven't heard about it, you need to get on that bandwagon because Q&A is awesome.
Yeah.
Right? It's great from a development perspective because if you're really good at that, searching that Google Kung Fu and you know how to kind of analyze your data just using kind of a native query language, you can create anything you need, which is awesome. And we had the capability to just double click and little box. And
right, that's what you do in the
question.
past, right? Absolutely.
That still exists with the double click. Now we get presented with a new visual display, and there's quite a laundry list of features that comes along with this new visualization.
Yeah, there's been a lot of enhancements with Q&A in general, and then they really are bringing Q&A to more prominence by bringing it in as its own visual. Like you said, you could use it in the past, of course, but there's been a lot of enhancements. So let's take a look.
Yeah.
All right.
And I like this because the idea of the Q&A as a whole, a box where someone can just type in whatever they want, is awesome, but it's also potentially a way to, I think some people get scared from it. It's like that overwhelming sensation of there's too much here. I have to come up with it. I need a little bit of guidance.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like this is what's being delivered here with this new version.
Yeah, and so you're right. What you would have done in the past is could have just double-clicked or clicked Ask a Question. That's been there in the past already. So if I double-click here, you'll see something appears, but there's some newness to this where you actually have things like some suggested questions appear ahead of time. You can see all the suggestions. You can use that. Or the piece that we're really highlighting that's brand new here is in the visualization section itself is you'll see the new Q&A visual that you can choose. We're not going to really highlight it too much today because it's been around for a little bit, but there's also the Power Apps, what used to be a custom visual is now a native visual that you'll notice appear in here by default. And if we have some time, we'll show that as well, but that's been around for a little bit as a custom visual. All right, so we're going to go ahead and select the Q&A visual. And again, you'll see it looks the same thing as if I had double-clicked. And from here, you can select any of the suggested questions, so I can choose one of the ones they provided below for me, and I can take this visual and make it my own. Now, a couple of the things that they've made better with this now than what they had before is previously when you used the Q&A double-click visual, is when you clicked away, you're now stuck with that visual. You can't make any changes to the Q&A search. Now it actually retains the Q&A search capabilities up top, and you can go and make some modifications to it. Or if you're really happy with the way the visual looks and you don't want to make any more changes, you can click this option here, which will basically switch it to a standard visual, and you cannot make any more changes to the Q&A search box that was up there. So really cool capabilities that's built in, but there's more. So let's actually show you one other thing here. I'm going to go ahead and bring in a Q&A visual here again. And this time, what I want to search here is something simple. Maybe we just search something like the sales amount by sales territory. So I'll search sales amount by sales territory. Now you'll notice one thing that's been an enhancement in here is they've made some additional modifications to the way that it looks for terms that are in your model. So if you make spelling mistakes, things like that, it did help you a little bit with that in the past, but now it's helping you actually even more than it did in the past. So I can search for sales territory region, and I should be able to find that, return that back here just fine. But there's some extra settings now that we can do in here as well. So if we go over to the little settings icon right here, this allows us to make some additional modifications. And you can do things like review questions that have been asked. You can actually teach Q&A. In the teach Q&A section, you can do things like define adverbs and adjectives and things like that. Eventually, you'll actually be able to hopefully come back in here and define verbs. That's not there quite yet. But you can do things like define what does it mean to be the best. Gotcha. So for example, let's say we went under the teach Q&A section here, and you can see it's already got one of the questions that we added. But let's say that I asked for something like show best products. You'll see that best is kind of underlined in red because it doesn't know what the word best means as far as our data model. We haven't defined what that means. So again, red is just underlines a term that Q&A can't understand. It's not in our model in any way. So we're going to go ahead and define it. And so if we go ahead and click the submit option on the right-hand side, we can then define what does it mean to be the best product, or in this case, it's determined the synonym for best to be good product. And so we can say that the best products or good products are ones with the highest sales. So if we say highest, and we can say sales amount or sales, it should determine, and it'll actually bring back on the right-hand side, the type of visual that will be returned back when we ask for it to show the best products. Now, previous to us defining this, here's what it would have shown. If we had used Q&A and typed in show best products, it would have just given us a list of all the products, which is what you see will pop up here after a few moments. But instead, when we define what the best products mean to be the highest sales, then when we define it in that manner, you can actually save this, and it's going to return back the top 10 products by sales amount.
Nice. It definitely feels like an extension to synonyms.
Yeah.
Synonyms there just gave us that capability of knowing, hey, our audience could search this, could search that. Now we can add some more elements in the underlying definitions of what that is.
Yeah, you're really able to kind of modify the linguistics, and I like the way that they've done it this way. It's a very easy way to interact with. There's not some complicated file you have to create in the back end like there is in some other areas of the tool. All right, so we can save this definition, and then when you do that, you can go manage any of the terms that you create here. So you can see the term was good. We defined good as products that have high sales amount. And you can always go back here and delete it or modify it. Really, you just delete it and recreate it if you needed to here. Yeah. So pretty cool. Very cool. So that's it for some of the Q&A changes that have come. Pretty interesting stuff. Let's flip back and talk about the next item we want to highlight here.
Certainly. So a rather recent addition that we covered in one of ours, we spoke about the query analyzer.
Yeah.
It was something that gave us this capability to just kind of discover performance barriers or any sort of performance-related elements inside of the data model, right? DAX-related elements such as that, queries. Well, we have something now that has come now into the shaping side in the Power Query editor. Now we find ourselves with something that we can find diagnostics with. So that's what it's called. It's just a diagnostics monitor.
Yep.
And this is something also that we would have to turn on in the previews.
Right. This is a preview feature.
But now, when you go into your Power Query editor, there will be a new option available to you to effectively toggle this on, effectively start this monitoring service, and bring in tables, conditional columns. You just have your day with just doing any sort of M transformational elements, anything at all. When you're set and ready, stop diagnostics. It actually creates a couple tables for us.
Yeah.
We can kind of analyze and see what's going on there. So just a little more visibility.
Yeah, so like you said, what we learned about in the past shows us performance of our visuals and our model. That was the query, or the performance analyzer on the query side, on the visual side. And then now we have in the data shaping side. So in the query editor, we can now look at the performance of us actually bringing data in and bringing it into our model. So let's go ahead and jump in. It's a pretty quick one to show right now. I think it looks like there's probably going to be a lot of enhancements over time. Like you mentioned, this is in preview. So there'll be a lot of new stuff that comes with this over time. But let's take a look. All right. So obviously we mentioned this is part of the query editor. So let's go launch our query editor here. And there's only a couple instances where you can really kick off the query analyzer or the diagnostics capabilities here. You'll see underneath the tools section, you can start a diagnostics. And when you do that, you won't really see anything happen until you actually kick off a reason for it to do some diagnostics. There could be some transforms that initiate the diagnostics, or it could be that you import another data source.
Yeah.
So if I go to, let's say, the home ribbon here, and I add in another item from the sheet that we're already looking at, you can go to recent sources here even. And if I pull from my data source, or a data source, doesn't matter which one, I can select another table here, for example, hit OK, and it's going to run diagnostics on this new data import. And I can go check out the diagnostics by basically stopping the execution that we have going on right now. So if I go back underneath the Tools menu here and hit Stop Diagnostics, you'll see two new queries get added. One is a summarized version of the information that it's created, and then the other one is a more detailed view. So you can see the one called Detailed versus the other one that would be your summarized one. And so within inside of this, there's a lot of interesting stuff that you can kind of dig deeper into and see what kind of operations it was running, when did it do it, what was the duration of that operation that was occurring. So I definitely recommend exploring this a little bit. You can even add these to your data model. By default, it's actually turned off, so it's not going to load into your data model, but you could enable it so you can start to build some visuals on top of it if you really wanted to. But again, you have two different queries you can start to explore, one with a detailed view of the diagnostics, and then one with more of a summarized view, which is what we're looking at here, where it's broken down each one of our steps inside of our query and given us information about how each of them perform. So pretty interesting stuff. This might even help you diagnose things like you're trying to make sure query folding is being optimized to the extent that it should be. This allows you to kind of go verify that in this case. Very cool. Let's flip back here to talk about something else.
So in addition to that, which I do very much like, that you can have complete control. You have a set scenario, you have some issues going on performance-wise, you're in control. Start and stop, do this definable thing, let's see what's going on.
Right.
You're in complete control, which I like. But in addition, beyond that as well, they've introduced some new connectors, some changes. We have definitely the Azure Cost Management connector.
Yeah.
So that's been there.
I think I saw 3 or 4 different new connectors. Yeah. Some of them have existed in the past and just had updates. So for those of you that are using Azure, the Azure Cost Management connector is a great one to be able to actually see where your expenses are coming from within Azure. And they've made some updates to it. That's a big thing here.
Keeping an eye on the charges is a somewhat critical task.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing that we're really going to finish up on is talking about a new Power BI file type that's been made available. Now, for those of you that have worked a lot with Excel, and maybe perhaps you have connections to cubes or connections to data sources, and you open up what's called like an Office Data Connection file, an ODS file, you can use that same kind of concept of an ODS file that you have within Office and Excel. You now have that concept within inside Power BI.
Nice, very nice.
So if you use that in Excel, what it did for you in Excel is you could just double click on this file and it would open up like an empty pivot table ready for you to build a report off the data source. Same kind of concept is now available inside of Power BI, where you have a Power BI file that you can open up that an administrator can create for you, points to the data source, and all you have to do is maybe a user that wants to create some reports, is double click on that file and it will open up to a connection that's already pointed to the right data source.
Gotcha, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think it's a little more refined way of, from a development perspective, we know these are the sources connected that we're going to need to connect to.
Yeah.
It's a little more refined way of than using a template. I think there's a time and a place for a template to export that to the PBIT.
Right.
I think this is more refined and specific around those sources, which is nice to have that option. You can create this, this new file, the PBIDS.
PBI DS, yes.
Just all these acronyms.
Needed to have a really long file name here. So let's take a look. This is a pretty simple one to show. I'm going to flip over here to our example, and I'm going to close out the query window real quickly before we demonstrate this. So I have a connection file that I've already created over here. You can see in my file folder, and actually I'll just go ahead and double click on it. So if I double click on this file here, this one called, bring it over so you can see it on the appropriate screen. Ooh. It's actually opening up on my other screen here, so bear with me for just a second. This is what it actually opened up, but let me bring over here what it looks like. Here we go. So here's the files that we've been using for today. We have this new PBI DS file that I can also open up and show you, to really show you what it looks like inside. If I just open it up in like Notepad, you can see this is the simple file that we're using. I'm connecting to a SQL server in this case, and we're connecting to the AdventureWorks DW 2017. I'm also using DirectQuery mode here. So what the behavior is if I close this once more and go ahead and open this again, what you'll see, it's opening on my other screen again. But what you will see is it will prompt me to verify that I have credentials access basically to the data source that we're using. And I can, if I hit connect, which again, I'm sorry, it's on my other screen here, but here's what we're seeing. It's going to then connect to my data source that was stored inside of that file, and then it's going to prompt me to immediately start to select tables that I want from that data source.
So this is back to familiar territory now. We're just moving forward, generating and creating a report.
Yeah,
with that source just been offered to us there.
Absolutely. So the idea again is I have maybe users that I want to go connect to these data sources. They're not really familiar with the server names and database names and things like that. So I want to give them a file that already is pointing to the data source, and all they have to do is double click on it, and then they can start to pick the tables they want.
No, absolutely. Definitely something else to the toolset to streamline the development process.
Absolutely. All right, so let's wrap it up real quick. So quite a few interesting things that came out this month. Some brand new preview features that we haven't seen before, and then other things were highlighted in that have maybe existed before. So Q&A existed before. There's now a Q&A visual that really puts an emphasis on it.
A little more polished there.
Yep, absolutely. The Power Apps visual, we didn't show that today, but the Power Apps visual we've shown in other demonstrations as well. But Power Apps allows you to then embed a Power App inside of your report. The huge benefit there is you can now have write back to your data sources. So I can have an app inside of my report that writes back to the data source that's being used inside of Power BI, make changes within that app, and then see the results immediately within inside my report.
It's great versatility, that actionable. Now your report that you're looking at, you can take action against it, so to speak. So it's really awesome.
Yeah, so those things have been out before, but they've been more emphasis placed on them today. We saw the Query Diagnostics as a new feature as well. So a lot of cool things. We're curious, what's your favorite thing that came out this month? Comment below and let us know what your favorite is. Also, make sure, of course, you check out our training classes. We've done some huge updates on our Power BI classes just recently. So make sure you take a look at those to see everything that's lately come out. We've now updated and pushed into our classes because we want to make sure that we have the most up-to-date training for you. So make sure you check those out and through our on-demand learning platform. Hope you enjoyed this one. Of course, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell to make sure you notify whenever we have these new videos that come out. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, my name is Devin Knight.
Manuel Quintana.
We'll see you next time.